The story opens on a grey London afternoon in a Kensington townhouse that speaks of wealth and careful curation. Sarah Mitchell, 34 years old, with an elegance that comes from years of playing a part, walks through the hallway carrying burgundy heels she's spent 2 weeks selecting for tonight's charity gala. The house is quiet, except for the distant murmur of her husband's voice coming from his study. As she passes the half-open door, something in his tone makes her pause. James is on the phone, and his voice has that flat, business-like quality he never uses when he knows she's listening. "Mother, I've told you a dozen times," James says with barely concealed impatience. "Sarah serves a purpose right now. She makes me look stable, responsible. The board loves the family man image. Once the merger goes through and I'm secured as CEO, we can revisit the conversation about Helena." Sarah freezes mid-step, her heart suddenly hammering in her chest. Helena. The name drops like a stone into still water, sending ripples of ice through her veins. She presses herself against the hallway wall, barely breathing, straining to hear every word. James continues, oblivious to his wife standing just outside the door. "Yes, Mother, I'm aware Helena comes from proper money. Yes, I know Sarah's background isn't ideal. Her parents were a teacher and a nurse from Manchester, for God's sake. But for now, she's useful. Think of her as an investment that's almost matured. The returns have been good, but it's nearly time to cash out and reinvest in something with better pedigree." He laughs at something his mother says, a cold sound that Sarah has never heard directed at her before. "Of course I'll be discreet about it. Sarah's not stupid, but she's sentimental. She won't see it coming until the papers are already drawn up." Sarah backs away from the door silently, her mind racing but her movements carefully controlled. She walks back to their bedroom. Their bedroom, she thinks bitterly, though soon it will just be his bedroom again, and sits at her vanity. Her reflection stares back at her. Perfectly applied makeup, hair styled in soft waves, the burgundy dress hanging on the wardrobe door behind her. She looks like a woman preparing for a triumphant evening. She feels like a woman who has just discovered she's been living in a carefully constructed lie. In voiceover, we hear her thoughts as she stares at herself in the mirror. 8 years. 8 years of being the perfect wife, the supportive partner who never complained when he took credit for her ideas in casual conversation. 8 years of being the invisible hand behind his success, the woman who strategized his company's biggest wins during late nights while he golfed with clients. 8 years of thinking they were building something together. That love meant supporting each other's dreams, even when the support only ever flowed in one direction. And all along, she was just useful, temporary, disposable, an investment that had almost matured, ready to be cashed out for someone with better pedigree. Sarah's hands shake as she applies her lipstick, but she forces them steady. Something cold and calculating is awakening inside her, something she didn't know she possessed. She could storm into his study right now. She could throw these expensive shoes at his head and walk out with nothing but her dignity. But that would give him exactly what he wants. A clean break, a simple story about an emotional wife who couldn't handle success. No, if she's going to do this, she's going to do it right. She's going to make sure that when this marriage ends, the truth comes with it. She finishes getting ready with meticulous care, every detail perfect. The dress fits like it was made for her because it was. She'd taken James's credit card and bought something that cost more than she would normally spend, a small rebellion she hadn't even recognized as such at the time. Now it feels like armor. She puts on the jewelry he gave her for their 5th anniversary, diamonds that probably cost less than he'd told her, but which she'd cherished anyway. Now they feel like payment for services rendered. In the car to the gala, James sits beside her scrolling through his phone, completely oblivious to the fact that his wife has fundamentally changed in the past 3 hours. The leather interior smells expensive, like everything in James's world, like everything that's about to come crashing down around him. Big night tonight. James says without looking up from his screen, his tone casual and proprietary. The partnership announcement will change everything. Morrison and Chen are finally coming on board, and that means the company valuation triples. We'll finally be in the major leagues, Sarah. Sarah looks at him, really looks at him for perhaps the first time in years. His profile in the dim light of the car, the expensive watch on his wrist that she gave him for his last birthday, the tailored suit that makes him look every inch the successful executive. She wonders how she missed it, the fundamental selfishness that runs through him like a core of iron. Or perhaps she didn't miss it. Perhaps she saw it and made excuses, reframed it as ambition or drive or the kind of focus that successful people need to have. Yes, she says quietly, her voice giving nothing away. Everything is going to change. James doesn't notice her tone, doesn't catch the double meaning in her words. He never does. He's too busy being the center of his own universe to notice what's happening in the orbits around him. Sarah stares out the window at the London streets sliding past, at the people hurrying along pavements with their own lives and dramas and betrayals, and she feels strangely calm. She has no plan yet, not really, but she has clarity, and right now, that feels like enough. They arrive at the Dorchester, and the evening unfolds with the practiced choreography of the wealthy and connected. The ballroom glitters with crystal chandeliers that scatter light like diamonds across white tablecloths and expensive gowns. James is immediately in his element, working the room with the easy confidence of someone who has never been told no, never been made to feel small, never questioned whether he belongs in spaces like this. His hand touches the small of Sarah's back occasionally, a gesture she once found comforting and now recognizes as ownership. "This is mine," the gesture says to the room. "This woman belongs to me." Sarah smiles and makes conversation with the wives of executives, with the executives themselves who barely register her presence, with the charity organizers who thank her effusively for coming, without knowing that she's the one who actually chose this charity, did the research, convinced James it would look good for his image. She laughs at the right moments, her laugh light and musical and completely hollow. And she watches James, really watches him, perhaps for the first time in years. She sees how his eyes glaze over when she speaks, how he shifts his weight almost imperceptibly away from her, as if creating physical distance from anything she might say. She sees how he steers conversations away from her work when someone asks what she does, deflecting with "Sarah's in marketing" in a tone that suggests it's barely worth mentioning. She sees how he introduces her to people. "This is my wife, Sarah," and nothing more, as if she has no substance beyond her relationship to him, no identity worth acknowledging, no achievements worth sharing. An older woman, Lady something or other, whose name Sarah can't remember, asks her about her own career, and before Sarah can answer, James interjects smoothly. "Sarah's been wonderful about prioritizing family and supporting my work," he says, with a smile that looks warm but feels dismissive. Not everyone understands that building something significant requires sacrifice, and I'm grateful she's been willing to make those sacrifices. The woman nods approvingly, and Sarah feels something crack inside her chest, a small fracture in the facade she's maintained for so long. Dinner is served. Perfectly prepared salmon with microgreens and some kind of reduction sauce that probably cost more per plate than Sarah's parents spent on groceries in a week. Sarah pushes the food around her plate, appetite gone, while James entertains the cluster of executives seated around them with stories that paint him as a visionary, a risk-taker, a man who makes bold decisions and always comes out on top. She recognizes these stories. They're hers. The marketing campaign that saved his company £12 million last year, the one she strategized during countless late nights while he attended networking dinners and golf outings. James tells it as his own brilliant pivot, his instinct to go against conventional wisdom, his willingness to take risks that others wouldn't. The crisis management approach that protected their reputation during a product recall that could have destroyed the company. He presents it as his anecdote about trusting his instincts in the face of panic, about staying calm when everyone else wanted to follow the lawyer's advice to stonewall. Sarah sips champagne and smiles and feels something hard and bright crystallizing in her chest. It's not anger yet. Anger will come later. Right now, it's something colder, something more dangerous. It's the death of illusion, the final dissolution of the story she's been telling herself about who they are and what their marriage means. Every lie James tells is another nail in the coffin of their relationship, and he doesn't even realize he's holding the hammer. Then come the speeches, and Sarah's sense of foreboding intensifies. The charity is something to do with education for underprivileged children. Children like Sarah once was, she thinks bitterly, though James would never make that connection or see the irony. James supports this charity purely for the tax benefits and the social currency it provides, the way it makes him look magnanimous and socially conscious. He's been invited to speak about corporate responsibility, and he stands with the easy confidence of a man who has never been told no, never been made to feel small, never been called useful, as if that was the height of generosity someone could show him. James takes the microphone and the room quiets respectfully. He thanks the organizers with practiced charm, makes a self-deprecating joke about his golf handicap that lands perfectly with scattered laughter, settles into his role as speaker with visible pleasure. And then he looks directly at Sarah and she sees it, that flicker of something cruel in his eyes, something that says he knows she heard him earlier with his mother and he simply doesn't care. If anything, he's pleased about it. Pleased to have this power over her, pleased to know something she thinks is secret. I want to take a moment to acknowledge my incredible wife, Sarah, James says, and the room politely applauds, the kind of automatic response wealthy people give to mentions of spouses at charity events. Sarah feels her face freeze into a smile that probably looks deranged to anyone paying close attention, though no one is. Marriage isn't easy, as anyone in this room can attest. It requires patience, compromise, and a certain generosity of spirit. He pauses, and Sarah can feel it coming, can sense the shift in his tone like a change in air pressure before a storm. Sarah came from very humble beginnings. James continues, his voice taking on that particular quality of someone congratulating themselves on their own tolerance. Her parents were working class, salt-of-the-earth types, and she worked her way up through sheer determination. I admire that tremendously. Not everyone has the advantages I was fortunate enough to be born with. The education, the connections, the social fluency that opens doors. When we married 8 years ago, I made a commitment, and I'm a man who honors his commitments even when they're challenging. The room is listening now. Some people nodding along, others looking vaguely uncomfortable without quite knowing why. James presses on, warming to his theme. There have been adjustments, of course, cultural differences, different expectations about what marriage means, different comfort levels in environments like this one. But I've never wavered in my support. She's lucky I kept her, really, through all those adjustments and challenges. Not everyone would have had that patience. He says it with a laugh, as if he's making fun of himself for being so noble, so patient, so generous with his tolerance of a wife who came from humble beginnings and had to be taught how to belong in his world. But Sarah hears the truth beneath it, the truth that he knows she overheard him with his mother, and he's now saying it publicly, dressing it up as self-deprecating humor while actually humiliating her in front of 300 people. The room laughs with him, uncomfortable laughter from some, genuine amusement from others who don't see the cruelty. And Sarah sits there, something cracking inside her, that hard, bright thing expanding until she thinks she might shatter right there at the head table. Before she can move, Before she can even process what she would do next or whether she should stand up or stay frozen or run from the room, a man stands up 3 tables away. Sarah recognizes him vaguely. Marcus Westwood, the American tech billionaire who recently moved to London, someone James has been desperately trying to impress for months, sending emails and requests for meetings that have mostly gone unanswered. Marcus is in his early 50s with silver hair and sharp suit, the kind of face that gives nothing away, the kind of presence that commands attention without demanding it. Marcus walks toward the stage with purpose, his stride confident, and James, still holding the microphone and probably expecting congratulations or agreement, looks momentarily confused. The room goes silent in the way rooms do when something unexpected is happening, when the script everyone thought they were following has suddenly been torn up. Marcus holds out his hand for the microphone, and James, caught off guard and unable to refuse without looking foolish, hands it over with a nervous laugh that doesn't quite land. "James Mitchell," Marcus says, his American accent clear and authoritative in a room full of British vowels and careful consonants. "I'm going to interrupt you for just a moment if I may." It's phrased as a question, but delivered as a statement. Marcus turns to face the room, his expression unreadable, but his body language commanding. "I've been listening to your speech with great interest, and I feel compelled to share something with everyone here tonight. You see, I make it my business to know who I'm dealing with, especially when someone is as persistent in seeking my investment as you've been, James." James's face goes pale, then red, then pale again. He's standing awkwardly at the edge of the stage, not quite knowing whether to try to reclaim the microphone or sit down or what the appropriate response is when a billionaire hijacks your speech. Marcus continues, his voice calm but carrying easily across the silent room. "And in doing my research, I'm very thorough about these things. I discovered something fascinating. The marketing genius behind your company's turnaround last year, the campaign that saved you £12 million and completely repositioned your brand? That wasn't you, James. It was Sarah." He looks directly at Sarah then, and she sees something in his eyes, something that looks almost like respect, like recognition of someone he's never met but somehow already knows. "The crisis management strategy that saved your reputation during that product recall disaster? Also Sarah. In fact, every major strategic decision that's made your company worth my potential investment can be traced back to work your wife did, often without credit, always without appropriate recognition, and apparently without even your acknowledgement that she was the source." The room is utterly silent now. 300 people frozen in various states of shock or fascination or horrified interest. Sarah can feel every eye turning toward her, but she can't move, can't breathe, can't process what's happening. Marcus holds up a hand when James tries to speak. "I had a very interesting conversation last week with Emma Chen," Marcus continues, and Sarah's heart lurches. Emma, her best friend, her law school roommate who became an attorney. She's an attorney, as some of you may know, and she happens to be Sarah's closest friend. She was concerned enough about some things she'd noticed, some patterns in how credit was being distributed, to reach out to my office, and she provided documentation, emails, strategy documents, presentation drafts, all time-stamped, all clearly authored by Sarah, many of them later appearing under James's name with nothing changed but the byline. Sarah can see James's face cycling through expressions: shock, anger, calculation, fear. He's trying to figure out how to spin this, how to regain control of a situation that's spiraling away from him faster than he can process. But Marcus isn't done. "So when you stand here tonight and make jokes about how lucky your wife is that you kept her," Marcus says, his voice hardening, "having just claimed credit for her work in your speech, having just described her as someone who comes from humble beginnings, as if that's something she should be grateful you overlooked. I think this room deserves to know the truth about who's really been lucky in this marriage. I think these people deserve to know that the man they've been applauding as a visionary is actually someone who built his reputation by systematically stealing credit from his own wife. Marcus walks over to Sarah's table and holds out the microphone to her, just walks over and places it in her hands, then steps back, giving her the choice, but also making it clear that this is her moment if she wants it. Sarah stands on shaking legs, looking out at 300 faces, some sympathetic, some shocked, some avid with the kind of interest people have for drama that doesn't touch their own lives. She sees James at the edge of the stage, his expression cycling between fury and calculation. She sees Emma sitting near the back with tears streaming down her face and a small, fierce smile. She sees Marcus standing a few feet away, this stranger who just upended her entire world without asking permission. Sarah takes the microphone, and when she speaks, her voice is steadier than she feels, clearer than she expected, carrying across the room with a calm that comes from having nothing left to lose. I didn't know Marcus was going to say any of that, Sarah begins. And it's true, she had no idea, is still processing the fact that Emma went behind her back to protect her, that a billionaire she's never spoken to just defended her in front of the entire industry. But since we're being honest tonight, since apparently the time for polite fictions has passed, let me add something to what Marcus shared with you. She takes a breath, feeling every eye in the room on her, feeling the weight of this moment. 3 hours ago, I was in our home in Kensington, getting ready for this gala, when I overheard my husband on the phone with his mother. I heard him say that I serve a purpose right now, that I make him look stable and responsible, that the board loves the family man image, that once the merger goes through and he's secured as CEO, he can revisit his relationship with someone named Helena, someone who apparently comes from proper money, unlike me. Someone whose parents aren't a teacher and a nurse from Manchester. The room gasps, a collective intake of breath. Some people look genuinely shocked, others uncomfortable. A few seem grimly unsurprised, as if they've suspected something like this all along. James lunges forward, his face purple with rage, but Marcus steps smoothly between them, his body language making it clear that he's not moving. I heard him tell his mother to think of me as an investment that had almost matured, Sarah continues, her voice gaining strength. An investment he was ready to cash out and reinvest in something with better pedigree. So yes, James, let's talk about luck. You're lucky I spent 8 years making you look brilliant. You're lucky I never asked for credit because I loved you and thought we were building something together, thought we were partners. You're lucky I smiled through dinners with your dismissive mother who never thought I was good enough. You're lucky I gave up a promotion in New York to stay here with you. You're lucky I decorated your house and managed your social calendar and strategized your company's biggest wins while you took all the credit and all the glory. Sarah's voice doesn't break, doesn't waver. She's found something inside herself, some core of steel she didn't know existed. And you're spectacularly lucky that I'm standing here right now, giving you this public exposure, instead of quietly going to my attorney tomorrow morning and filing for divorce with a detailed accounting of intellectual property theft and fraud. Although honestly, James, I'm not sure I won't still do that. The day is young, after all. She sets the microphone down on the table with a soft thud that somehow echoes in the silent room, and she walks off that stage with her head high, her heart hammering so hard she thinks it might burst through her chest. Absolutely no idea what she's going to do next, but certain that whatever it is, it will be hers alone. She doesn't look back at James, doesn't give him the satisfaction. She just walks, one foot in front of the other, through the silent ballroom toward the doors, and nobody tries to stop her. Emma catches up with her in the corridor outside the ballroom, grabbing her arms with both hands, her face anguished and fierce and streaming with tears. Sarah, I'm so sorry, Emma says in a rush. I should have told you what I was doing. I know I should have asked first, but I knew if I told you, you'd try to stop me. You'd say it wasn't worth the risk, or you'd try to handle it quietly, or you'd make excuses for him the way you've been making excuses for 8 years. And when I found out what he'd been saying about you to his mother, what she was planning with this Helena woman, I just couldn't let it happen. I couldn't watch you get blindsided and discarded like you were nothing. Sarah is shaking, adrenaline coursing through her body, making her feel simultaneously invincible and about to collapse. How did you even know Marcus Westwood? She asks, because her brain is trying to make sense of what just happened, trying to put the pieces together. Emma wipes her eyes, smearing mascara across her cheekbones. I didn't know him, Emma admits. I'd never met him, never spoken to him, but I knew his reputation. He's famous in Silicon Valley for absolutely destroying men who steal credit from their employees, especially from women. His younger sister went through something similar years ago, worked for a startup where the founders took credit for her designs, and Marcus was so furious he funded her lawsuit and helped her start her own company. So I gambled. I put together a package 2 weeks ago with copies of everything. Every email where you'd sent James a strategy and he'd forwarded it without attribution. Every document with your name on it that later appeared as his presentation. Every time-stamped piece of evidence I could find. And I sent it to his office with a letter explaining that you were my friend, that you were brilliant, and that you were being systematically erased by your own husband. Emma's voice breaks. I gambled that he'd care enough to look into it, that his reputation was real and not just PR. And I was right. His office called me 3 days ago, said he'd reviewed everything and wanted to talk. We met for coffee, and I told him everything. Not just about the work stuff, but about James's mother, about the way he introduces you at parties, about the Helena situation that I'd heard about from one of his junior associates who gossips too much. And Marcus just sat there getting angrier and angrier in that cold, quiet way scary people get angry. And he said he was coming to this gala, and if the opportunity presented itself, he was going to do something about it. Sarah pulls Emma into a hug, this friend who risked her own professional reputation to protect her, who took action when Sarah was still frozen in shock and indecision. They stand there in the corridor, 2 women in evening gowns holding each other while a gala continues without them, while Sarah's marriage ends in public, while everything changes. What happens now? Sarah whispers against Emma's shoulder. Emma pulls back, and her expression is fierce, protective, the look of a lawyer who's about to go to war. Now, Emma says, now you get every single thing you're owed. Now we build a case that makes James and his company wish they'd given you credit from the beginning. Now we make sure the whole world knows exactly who's been the genius in that partnership. Now, Sarah, you stop being invisible. The next morning, Sarah wakes up in Emma's guest room with sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains and her phone exploding with notifications. She picks it up with trepidation, not sure what she's going to find. The story has already hit the press, multiple outlets, major publications, tech blogs, business journals. Billionaire exposes executives' lies at charity gala. Tech mogul defends woman publicly humiliated by husband at event. Marketing genius Sarah Mitchell finally gets credit after years of husband's theft. Sarah scrolls through article after article, seeing her name in headlines, seeing James's company mentioned alongside words like fraud and investigation and credit theft. There are quotes from people who were in the ballroom, descriptions of what Marcus said, speculation about what will happen next. Her phone keeps buzzing with texts and calls, former colleagues, old friends, people she hasn't spoken to in years, all reaching out with variations of the same message. I always knew you were brilliant. I suspected something was wrong. I'm so glad the truth is finally out. Then her phone rings with a number she doesn't recognize. Sarah stares at it for a moment, then answers. Sarah Mitchell? The voice is female, professional, crisp. This is Catherine Reeves from Westwood Enterprises. Mr. Westwood would like to meet with you this afternoon if you're available. He has a business proposition he'd like to discuss. Sarah meets Marcus later that day in a private room at Claridge's, all elegant neutrals and quiet luxury, the kind of place where important conversations happen behind closed doors. Marcus stands when she enters, shakes her hand firmly with no trace of pity or awkwardness, and gestures for her to sit. He gets straight to the point in a way Sarah finds oddly refreshing after years of James's circuitous approach to everything. "I owe you an apology," Marcus says first. "What I did last night was impulsive and put you in an extremely difficult position without your consent. That wasn't fair to you, regardless of my intentions or my anger at your husband's behavior. You didn't ask to be defended publicly, and I should have found a way to contact you first and see what you wanted." Sarah sits down, still processing everything, still feeling like she's moving through a dream where the rules keep changing. "Why did you do it?" she asks. "You don't know me. You risked your own reputation, your relationship with James's company, made yourself part of a very messy public situation. Why?" Marcus leans back, studying her with those sharp eyes that miss nothing. "Because I've built 3 companies from nothing, and every single one of them required me to recognize talent, real talent, not just people who are good at taking credit or schmoozing investors or looking the part. When Emma Chen's package arrived on my desk, I spent 2 days personally reviewing everything she sent. Your work is exceptional, Sarah. The strategies you've developed, the way you think about market positioning and crisis response and brand rehabilitation, it's exactly the kind of thinking my investment firm looks for." He pauses, making sure she's really hearing him. "I've funded hundreds of ventures, and I can tell within 5 minutes of reading a pitch whether someone actually understands their market or whether they're just regurgitating business school jargon. Your work has that quality of genuine insight, of someone who doesn't just understand theory but understands how people actually think and behave. And the idea that someone with your capabilities was being systematically erased by their own husband? That made me angry in a way I haven't been in years." "What kind of business proposition?" Sarah asks, because she's learning to be direct, learning that subtlety and patience, and waiting for other people to acknowledge her value, cost her 8 years of credit and respect. She's done waiting. Marcus smiles slightly, the first real warmth she's seen from him. "I want to hire you," he says simply. "Not as an employee reporting to someone else, but as an independent consultant for my investment portfolio. I back about 30 companies at any given time, and most of them struggle with the exact things you're brilliant at: positioning, crisis management, strategic messaging. The pay is substantial. We can discuss specific numbers, but I promise it will be more than fair. The work is challenging, and you'd be working directly with me and my senior team. But more than that, more importantly, I want to help you get what you're owed from your husband's company." Sarah feels her breath catch. Marcus continues, his expression hardening. "Emma tells me you signed a post-nuptial agreement 5 years ago?" Sarah nods, confused about why that matters. "James insisted on it when he was promoted to COO. He said it was standard for executives at his level, that the company required it. I didn't think much of it at the time." Marcus's expression turns grim. "That agreement isn't standard. I've reviewed it. Emma sent me a copy, and it's specifically designed to waive your right to any intellectual property you developed during the marriage. Someone helped James craft that document specifically to protect him if you ever realized what he was doing and tried to claim credit or compensation. It's actually quite sophisticated in how it's worded to sound like normal martial asset protection, while actually being much more specific." He leans forward. "Emma's already filed a motion to invalidate that agreement on the grounds that you signed it under false pretenses without proper legal counsel of your own. And I've put my legal team at your disposal, some of the best attorneys in London, people who specialize in intellectual property theft and corporate fraud. We're going to prove that your work made his company valuable, that he deliberately and systematically stole credit for your contributions, and we're going to get you compensated accordingly, not just in the divorce settlement, but from the company itself." Sarah leaves that meeting 3 hours later with a consulting contract worth 3 times her annual salary, a legal team that terrifies her with their efficiency and precision, and a plan. Not just for divorce, not just for escaping James, but for something bigger. Revenge, she's learning, isn't just about anger, though she has plenty of that simmering beneath her surface. It's about strategy and patience, and making sure that when the dust settles, the truth is undeniable and the consequences are permanent. Over the next 3 weeks, Sarah moves into a flat in Marylebone that Emma helps her find, smaller than the Kensington townhouse, but hers, truly hers. Without James's mother's disapproving comments about the decor, or James's assumption that his preferences matter more than hers. She serves James with divorce papers that include a detailed accounting of intellectual property theft, and she starts working with Marcus's team, diving into his portfolio companies, proving to herself and everyone else that she doesn't just understand strategy in theory but can execute it across different industries and contexts. James, predictably, fights back. His lawyers argue that Sarah is delusional, that she's simply confused about the collaborative nature of marriage, that she supported his work the way any good wife would, and is now trying to claim credit retroactively out of bitterness about the divorce. His mother releases a statement calling Sarah ungrateful and socially climbing, suggesting that she trapped James into marriage and is now trying to extract money from him after he finally saw through her. James himself gives an interview to a business publication where he paints Sarah as someone who couldn't handle being married to someone successful, who grew jealous and resentful and is now trying to destroy his reputation. Sarah watches that interview in Emma's office, the two of them sitting on the couch with wine and takeout, and she feels nothing but a cold, clear certainty that she's doing exactly the right thing. James looks smaller on screen somehow, defensive in a way he never used to be, and she can see the calculation in his eyes even as he performs wounded bewilderment. He's always been good at performing, she thinks. That's his actual talent. Not strategy, not vision, but performance. And now the performance is cracking. The discovery phase of the divorce is brutal and beautiful. Emma's firm, backed by Marcus's apparently infinite resources, subpoenas everything. Every email James has sent in the past 8 years, every document from his company's servers, every presentation, every strategy memo, every internal communication. James tries to argue that this is overly broad, that it's a fishing expedition, but the judge rules that given the specific claims of intellectual property theft, the discovery is warranted. And what they find is damning. There are chains of correspondence where James forwarded Sarah's detailed strategy documents to his executive team with instructions to implement them, always careful never to mention that Sarah was the source. There are drafts that Sarah wrote and emailed to James for his thoughts that later appeared as his presentations with nothing but the formatting changed and his name in the byline. There's a file on his personal computer labeled Sarah's Ideas with dozens of documents inside, each one a strategy or campaign or approach that Sarah had shared with him, often in casual conversation over dinner, each one later presented to his board as his own insight. But the most damaging evidence comes from James's own employees. Emma's team finds 3 people who have worked directly with both Sarah and James, who have been in meetings, seen the emails, watched the process unfold. One of them is Claire, James's executive assistant for the past 6 years, and her testimony is devastating. She explains that she was explicitly instructed by James to delete Sarah's name from documents before they were distributed to the board. She describes watching James prepare for presentations, where he struggled to explain details of strategies Sarah had created because he didn't actually understand the underlying logic. She produces emails where James asked her to clean up the attribution on various documents. When it's Sarah's turn to testify, she's surprisingly calm. She tells the truth simply and directly. She explains how she met James in business school, how they bonded over their shared ambition and different backgrounds, his privileged, hers working class. She talks about how in the early years of their marriage, she genuinely thought they were partners, that her ideas becoming his presentations was just the natural flow of a marriage where both people supported each other's careers. She explains how she prioritized his career over her own promotion to New York because she loved him and thought they were building a life together. Then she talks about the slow realization that credit only ever flowed in one direction, that James introduced her to his colleagues without mentioning her own career, that he described her work as helping me think through things, rather than as the source of actual strategies. She discusses the post-nuptial agreement he insisted she sign, how she trusted him when he said it was standard, how she didn't think to get her own lawyer because she believed her husband had her best interests at heart. And finally, she talks about the morning of the gala, standing in the hallway of their Kensington home, hearing James describe her as useful, as an investment that had almost matured, as someone whose lack of pedigree was a problem he was preparing to solve. I realized in that moment, she says, her voice steady, that I had been systematically erased from my own life. Not just professionally, but personally. I wasn't a partner to him. I was a resource he was managing. The courtroom is silent. The judge, a woman in her 60s who has clearly seen every kind of marriage disaster, looks at Sarah with something that might be sympathy or might be recognition. Sarah doesn't cry. She doesn't perform grief or betrayal or rage. She just tells her story, and she watches the judge's expression shift from neutral professionalism to something that looks a lot like disgust. When James testifies, it's excruciating to watch. He tries to be charming, tries to paint Sarah as bitter and vindictive, a woman scorned who's rewriting history to justify her anger. He talks about how much he supported her career, how he encouraged her to pursue her interests, conveniently omitting that those interests were always subordinate to his needs. He describes their marriage as a true partnership where they both contributed in different ways, him with vision and leadership, her with support and practical execution. But under Emma's cross-examination, he falls apart spectacularly. She starts with simple questions, asking him to explain specific strategies, to walk through the thinking behind campaigns Sarah designed. He can't. He stutters and backtracks, and uses vague business jargon that sounds impressive, but means nothing. It was a holistic approach to brand repositioning, he says, about the campaign that saved his company £12 million. Emma presses him. Can you explain what that means specifically? What was the insight that drove the strategy? James falters. Well, it was about understanding the market dynamics and consumer psychology. Emma pulls out the original document Sarah wrote, walks him through it line by line, asks him to explain specific choices she made. He can't. Finally, desperate, he says, "Look, it's been 2 years. I don't remember every detail. It was Sarah's project initially, but I provided the strategic oversight." Emma pounces like a shark that's finally drawn blood. "So you agree that this was Sarah's project?" James tries to recover. "We worked on it together, as a team." Emma produces an email chain, has it displayed on screens throughout the courtroom. "This is you, taking sole credit for this exact project in an email to your board of directors, with no mention of Sarah's involvement whatsoever. No mention of teamwork or collaboration. Just you describing it as your strategy, your insight, your successful execution. Were you working together then, Mr. Mitchell?" James has no answer. His lawyer objects, tries to redirect, but the damage is done. Emma moves through campaign after campaign, strategy after strategy, and the pattern is undeniable. Sarah created it, James took credit, there's documentation of both. The courtroom watches a man who built his reputation on borrowed brilliance crumble under the weight of his own lies.